Good morning to everybody. Thanks for coming to this Energy Management Summit 2015. First of all, let me introduce me. I'm Joan Pinyol, co-founder and CEO of Dexma. I would like to start this morning by explaining you a little bit what you can expect from the next 4 hours. We're going to have case stories around energy management and energy efficiency. In this case, for example, the British Museum, presented by Optimized Buildings. Gary Vark here with us today, one of our partners in the UK. As well, Steven Fawkes, our key speaker that is going to do the opening session after me. He's going to be talking about how to increase energy efficiency investments, very important. As well, Gary Vark from L Component, a guy with more than 30 years experience in the British market with portable energy management solutions, that now he's transitioned a little bit as well in the cloud with us. So he's going to be talking about the dashboard effect. Of course, Dexma, Daniel Uches, our product director, it's going to be presenting the latest news around our software. Fabrizio is going to be talking, well, he's the CEO of Grandi Riso, it's this industry, and they're going to be explaining with our partner in EMA in Italy, how did they save and how they did reduce their energy consumption. As well, the entire team of Dexma is here today. We are open for feedback for customers, partners, and potential projects. So you're going to see us because we wear this green shirt. And of course, we have to be very thankful to our tech corner. We have a few sponsors over there with the coffee, where we are going to serve some food. And you can discover over there the latest devices, metering systems for electricity consumption, water, etc., etc. And of course, do a lot of networking for those attending today here. Because what we did this year different from other years, it's that, well, of course, we're doing this event in English. This is one of the changes that we did this year. But the other one, it's we are recording it and we are sending it through streaming to a lot of people that it's attending over there, every part in the world. Good, so thanks again. I have just 7 slides because they don't let me talk a lot when I introduce this this journey here. Just let me start explaining you what do we do at Dexma. So Dexma is a technological company. We do energy management software, cloud-based, and the main focus of this software is energy reduction and energy management in corporate buildings, commercial, public administration, and industrial sector. Some of the customers and markets that we are attending with our software and our partners are those. Here we start with customers that maybe just have one location or one building, to customers that start having more than hundreds of locations. So Dexma, I think that has already 2-3 customers with more than 300 locations monitored in real time. This is huge amounts of data, and as well, to analyze all this data, at the end of the day, you need a software that maybe it can be the Dexma one, of course. Some of our figures, so where we are, for those of you that don't know Dexma, so Dexma started on 2007. On 2010, we started to focus on energy efficiency and the energy industry. And so far, from the 2010 to 2015, we have gained over 1,000 end customers. From those end customers, some of them, they start having all these hundreds of locations, or they are maybe just one location. Of course, we couldn't do this work and offer this software that we are offering without our partners. So this is You know that it's one of the characteristics of our company that we are not selling direct. We normally go with energy services companies, with utilities, etc., etc. As well, this week we were named by this study that it's called Green Quadrant by Verdantix. Verdantix is an American, a British analyst that is covering the building energy management software industry. You know that there are like hundreds of suppliers over there, local, global, medium, small. And Dexma, as you can see here, so we were named as specialists. What does it mean this? So you have the innovators quadrant, the leaders, the challengers, and the specialists. What we were more proud of, it's if you can see this axis in the bottom of the page that says momentum. So if we take a look at who has more momentum than Dexma today in this industry, we could say that there are just 4 companies. There are quite more bigger than us, of course. Dexma is a 25-employee company. But this quadrant tells very well what we pretend to be. That we don't want to be the entire all project of energy efficiency. We just want to be part of it, and it's the technology, the software. So, well, we are very proud of, after working a lot of years to start being in these pictures, competing with global companies, of course. Well, and as well, so who we are. At Dexma, of course, there is a team behind. If not, we wouldn't be here today. Product management, it's led by Daniel Uches. He's going to present this morning the latest advances that we've done in the software. Operations and customer service is led by Xavi Novella, as well here, with Mireia and Alfonso, that they are over there outside. Sales, Niklas Lagerblad with Jaume, Guillermo, Uber, and Paul, as well today with us. Marketing, our latest hiring, Maria, over there, with Jennifer and Joel. Product development, that is one of our biggest departments in the company, led by Guillem Corominas, together with Albert, Guillermo, Jorge, David, and Victor. And of course, admin and finance that has come as well today with us. And me in the top 8. Good, so, well, I'm running almost out of time. So this is a little bit for those who don't know how do we work. So we offer this software. I'm not going to talk about the product because it's going to be Daniel who's going to do that. But here you can see some of our partners that are these companies that are using our software to manage their projects. We are starting to see every time more traction and more interest with utilities. That it's something that 3 years ago wasn't happening at the end in our sectors. And well, here you have different companies, but at the end of the day are all those companies that are interested in providing energy efficiency or energy management, those who use our software solution. Sorry. As well, in terms of going abroad. So in 2012, Dexma started to think we should sell this software outside Spain. The first 2 years, this process of going abroad, it was horrible, you can imagine, because there are many things that you have to take into account when you are a software of these characteristics to be used outside. It's not only the language, it's the tariff rates of each country, it's regulation, it's the metering system, it's the protocols. So after now 3.5 years doing this process of going outside Spain, we are very proud, and we were talking about this yesterday in a dinner, that we start seeing markets like UK, Italy, France, and Belgium, that we are starting to have traction with local companies, with partners, and as well with customers. And that's why we wanted this year to invite them here to present what they are doing, so we can share best practices on that. As well, Dexma, as you can see, we're working a lot in North America, Central America, and South America, apart from Europe and other markets. Good. So this one is the last one. Some of our achievements that we've done this last year. We have launched new features, and we've done a lot of performance improvement. This is going to be presented by Daniel. We have integrated new sources to get information in real time. You know that our software is compatible with many different vendors, and this is one of the key parts to set up very easily any project on energy efficiency. This one as well was presented last year. So of course, Dexma, it's a one-product company because it's cloud-based, so it's the same software for everybody, but then it gets customized, of course. And last year, we launched our professional services division that it's about extending the functionality of the software with new apps, with new reports, with new integrations, or wherever you need. We can extend the functionality of the software through professional services. And I would like as well to talk about the future of energy efficiency. So of course, when we started Dexma on 2007, 2010, it was more about just monitoring, we could say, and the dashboard. But we are seeing a lot of innovation and transition on the energy sector. So it's about solar, it's about storage, it's about as well monitoring, but then controlling. So all these things, we have ongoing research projects with different companies that where we are applying our software to all these new fields. So of course, if you have interesting proposals over there, let us know, because we would be pleased to see them. Good, and well, that's all. Very thankful to our sponsors today that helped us to organize this event, and all the registered people that is attending on site and via streaming as well, more than 200 this year. And well, thanks again, and I wish that you have a very interesting summit with us. And now I would like to present the key speaker, Dr. Steve Fawkes. To introduce him, Steve has been working in energy efficiency since 1980, and in that time has worked with major corporates, utilities, local and central governments, and multilateral institutions, developing energy management programs, implementing innovative energy services deals, founding ESCOs, and providing policy advice. Steve is the founder and principal of Energy Pro Ltd, an advisory group focused on energy efficiency and clean technology funding. He's also Confidence Project, a trustee of the National Energy Foundation and the independent member of the Investment Committee of the London Energy Efficiency Fund. He has published 2 books around energy efficiency and more than 200 articles on his blog called Only 11%. If you haven't read it, I really recommend you. He has very interesting articles around how to convince CFOs, etc., etc. And well, in this blog he has as well covers other interests like space travel, aviation, and Formula 1. A big applause for Steve. Thanks for coming today.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Very pleased to be here. So I'm going to talk about what I think is one of the most important subjects anywhere at the moment, which is how do we increase the flow of investment into energy efficiency. Some of what I'm going to talk about is about a project that is supported by the European Commission. So by their rules, I just have to show you this slide, but I'm not going to spend any time on it. I'm sure you've read the disclaimer. Okay, so I like to start off with a status report. As Joan said, space travel is one of my interests, and if you've ever watched the movie Apollo 13, there's a great moment when the flight controller says, "Give me a status report," or a status report, probably. So if we look at energy efficiency financing, we finally recognize the scale of the potential market. And for those of us who have been doing this a long time, it seems to have taken forever for people to have recognized the potential. But we now recognize that there's big, big potential for energy efficiency. Something that's happened fairly recently is recognition of co-benefits. So these are other benefits of energy efficiency, not just energy saving or financial saving directly from energy. And over the last 5 years, we've had a growing interest from institutional investors, so big investors, big banks, who have become interested in energy efficiency. 10 years ago, when I started talking about this, none of the banks or the investors were interested. Now they are interested. But everywhere I go, it's not just in Europe, there's a lot of frustration. It's the same even in the US, Asia, everywhere in the world. There's frustration that we have this big potential, but things are not happening fast enough. And in fact, one of the American bankers who's very interested in this subject summed it up like this. He said, the ratio of conferences to deals is too high. It's too much talking about it and not enough deals. So if we think about Europe just for a moment, and what would a healthy, buoyant European energy efficiency market look like? There would be strong demand from owners, building owners and investors. There would be a highly skilled workforce, an accredited workforce, a mix of financing products at different rates for different situations, and very standardized tools for tracking and quantifying savings, and an active secondary market in financing. That's what success would look like. But actually, we don't have any of that at the moment in Europe. We don't have any of it in the US. It's just starting to develop, and we don't have it anywhere in the world. But that's the situation that we want to get to. So how do we solve that problem? I'm quite a fan of jigsaws. I've managed to find this one just for the local audience. And I think this is a jigsaw. And it's a jigsaw. Fortunately, it has less than 1,000 pieces. These are some of the important pieces. Product offerings. I actually have a jigsaw just as a prop. Capacity building on the supply side, so that's in the energy efficiency industry. Capacity building in financial institutions, because although they are interested, they don't know very much about energy efficiency. Capacity building on the demand side, on the customer side. And then what I call the development gap. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these in turn. And then the final piece is standardization. Standardization is very, very important, and I'll focus really on standardization today. So, that's a car factory. Again, I picked a local example. Factories require standardization. You cannot have a factory unless everything is standardized. That's the secret of the Industrial Revolution, is really standardization. What people forget is this is also a factory. This happens to be Santander, but any bank, any financial institution is a factory. They operate on standardization. You cannot build a financial market without standardization. Now, a group was set up about 2 years ago by the European Commission and the United Nations Environment Programme called the Energy Efficiency Financial Institutions Group, which we shorten to EFIG. And if you have not read the EFIG report, I recommend everybody should read it. And the main conclusion from the EFIG report, and EFIG consisted of a lot of financial institutions looking at how to increase investment into energy efficiency, their number one barrier that they identified in every sector was lack of standardization. There was no standardization. And it wasn't only EFIG, Citigroup, who are very interested in energy efficiency. Michael Eckhart, who's one of the top sustainability bankers in the world, he said this, I don't often read slides, but this one is worth reading. Energy efficiency is in a category by itself, and energy efficiency projects do not meet the requirements of the capital markets, and no two projects or contracts are alike. And when you have everything different, that means the cost of doing a transaction is too high. So that's the problem. And I look at it by comparing it to other energy markets, because at the end of the day, we want energy efficiency to be just like energy. It's an energy resource. Now, if you happen to own an oil or gas field, the way that you develop that project is very standardized, it's very mainstream, and there are lots and lots of places where you can go and raise money to do an oil field. Maybe a few less now that the price is $50, but there's still lots of banks where you can go. If you're developing a wind farm, and 25, 30 years ago, I developed some of the first wind farms in the UK, and in those days, we made it up. The bank made it up, and there was only one bank in London that would fund wind farms. There was no standardized process. But now it's very standardized, it's very mainstream, there's a large volume of investment, and there's lots of places you can go for money. If you look at energy efficiency, it's not standardized, it's definitely not mainstream, and it's a very low volume, and there are very few places, very few banks that you can go to for money. So we need to make energy efficiency more like energy financing. Now, the lack of standardization is the subject of a project which I head up in Europe called the Investor Confidence Project, and this is a project that has support from the European Commission. And it's specifically looking at that lack of standardization. Now, if we have 3 projects in 3 buildings done by 3 developers, everybody will do things differently. I know if you had 5 energy efficiency consultants look at this building, you'd end up with 5 different reports in 5 different formats, 5 different calculations. Nothing would be the same. Everybody does it differently. And this alphabet soup, as my American friends say, of standards is very confusing, and it makes life very difficult. And it has 4 implications. There's greater performance risk. You're just really not sure what the outcome is going to be. Higher transaction cost. And if you're a bank or a financial institution, you can't build capacity around lack of standardization. You have to build teams around standard processes. And you can't aggregate projects because energy efficiency projects are very small. We need to aggregate them into bigger lumps. And you can't do that if everyone is developed and documented in a different way. So the Investor Confidence Project develops protocols, and protocols just are not about technical standards, but they're about organizing that process under the standard kind of project development steps of baselining, calculating savings, and so on. And this is very sort of nuts and bolts type work. It's very kind of simplistic in a way, but as I always say, and hopefully there aren't any banks or investors in the room, banks and financial institutions are very simplistic. They need things to be very simple. And we develop protocols by getting everybody together. So we brought investors together, financiers, energy efficiency industry, developers, ESCOs, government agencies, utilities. We put them all in a room, usually a virtual room, fortunately, and we have about 140 people across Europe who are working on this. And we develop these protocols into standards. And in fact, we are developing 6 different protocols for different types of situation and different types of buildings. We are launching the first 2 protocols this month, and 2 more to follow. And by the end of Q1 in 2016, we will have all these protocols out there in the marketplace. We have a European steering group with some big names and some smaller names. And we have a network of allies. And as of September, we had about 85 allies across Europe. We now, as of last week, have reached 100 allies. And anybody who wants to be an ally should go on the website and sign up. It does not cost you anything, but it gets you involved in the conversation. And welcome talking to anybody about that. And in terms of what we're doing, this year we're really creating tools, so the protocols mainly. We're taking those tools to market with pilot projects, and we have pilot projects in the UK, Germany, Latvia, Bulgaria, Austria, Portugal, and some other markets. So we're doing pilot projects now. And then really use those pilot projects next year and the year after to catalyze action and change the market. Now, where this is all going is to have a sort of quality assurance system. And in the US, where the Investor Confidence Project has been going longer, they now have this system called Investor-Ready Energy Efficiency, and they have project developers who are accredited, who are using the protocols. There are software providers who provide software that meet the protocols, and there are now quality assurance providers. And the numbers are growing all the time, and this is now being tested in California, New York, New Jersey, and many other places. So in Europe, we will get to this point. We're not quite there yet. And this, as I said, ends up with this idea of investor-ready energy efficiency. And when we talk to the big investors, actually, they are simple. They want the lowest cost thing. What they want is a stamp of approval that says this project has been developed in this standard way. And then they can look at 10 projects, 100 projects, or 1,000 projects. So that's where we're heading. If you are interested, please join as an ally. As I said, it doesn't cost anything. And you can also join our technical forum, and we want as many people from as many different countries to be involved in that. But also, if you have live projects or live programs that you think could benefit from this approach, please come and talk to me or make contact. Okay, so that's standardization. I just want to talk briefly about capacity building on the demand side, so customers, building owners. And the big problem of energy efficiency is it is boring. And having been involved in it since 1980, about 3 years ago, I realized the truth of how boring it was. So it was quite a shock. So we need to make it less boring. And cake's usually good for doing that. And this is the idea of co-benefits and what they call the layer cake of co-benefits. So energy efficiency is not just about saving energy and the cost saving. It brings a whole range of other benefits, both in the supply system, for the participant, benefits like productivity, health impacts, employee productivity. All these things have been measured in certain cases and have been proven to exist. And in fact, I say we should never, ever talk about energy efficiency without talking about co-benefits. They are very important, and they're growing in importance. And just some examples of co-benefits, removing constraints on production in Costa Coffee, greater reduction in days lost at work, greater satisfaction at work. All these things are starting to be measured. And they are much, much more interesting to decision makers, whether they're corporate decision makers or government decision makers. They are much more interesting than energy saving. Energy saving is totally dull, boring. So other things on the demand side, I am a big fan of ISO 50001 because it standardizes processes. Valuing co-benefits. Marks and Spencer's, the retailer in the UK, with the World Green Building Council, is doing a piece of work to value those co-benefits like employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction, increased revenue. And that work's going to be out in January. It's a really important piece of work. Everybody should look out for it. I think integrated design is important, and of course, outsourcing energy services. We outsource lots of other things, but we rarely outsource energy services. So the development gap. Anybody who's been in London will be familiar with the London Underground, mind the gap. The gap that I'm talking about is the gap between potential, we know there is this huge potential, and bankable projects. And very often the two things are confused. People say, oh, we have all these potential projects. But that's very, very different to having a bankable project that can be financed. And somehow we have to bridge that gap. And that requires some vision, some leadership. It requires skills. And it requires finance. Developing any project, whether it's an oil and gas field, a wind farm, or an energy efficiency project, takes time and money, and we need to finance that. And also, we need to move from developing one building at a time to developing whole regions, cities, portfolios of projects. One building at a time is not enough to solve the problem. Okay, product offerings. Now, whenever people talk about energy efficiency, the subject of energy performance contracts and ESCOs come out. And I'm notorious in Brussels because I always say energy performance contracts are not the answer. Lots of people think they are the answer, but they're not. And they have lots of problems, some of which are on this slide. You know, they are balance sheet funding, it's guarantee. Energy performance contracts are not the answer, believe me. They may work well in some sectors, like the public sector, but they're not the answer for the whole market. And it's quite funny because this interest in energy efficiency, which has been rising over 5 years, every so often I get people coming to me who have not been in energy efficiency, and they say, found this really great idea that's going to solve the market problem. Energy performance contract, shared savings. You say, well, actually, you know, people have been trying that for 30 years. And even in the US, where people think it's successful, it is a tiny, tiny, tiny market. It's very small. Energy performance contracts are not the answer. There is some interesting innovation occurring in this field. Energy efficiency services agreement, managed energy services, and measured energy efficiency transaction meets. Actually, as an aside, one of the problems of the energy efficiency industry is it has too many acronyms. It's a bit like space in that sense, but these are worth looking at, and we need more innovation on business models. The existing business models don't work very well. Okay, then capacity building on the supply side, so this is about the energy efficiency industry. We need to start things with finance in mind. What traditionally happens and still happens, and I see it a lot, people spend a lot of time and money developing a project, and then they go to the bank and say, can you finance it? By which time they've done something wrong, they don't have the data, and it creates a problem. You know, start with the bank and say, what do you need to finance this project? Again, we need scale because energy efficiency projects are very small. Let's develop big projects at scale, cities, regions, portfolios. We need some innovative offerings. And the energy efficiency industry really needs to understand its markets better. It's always been terrible at understanding markets and marketing. So, supply side, capacity building in financial institutions. As I said earlier, there's lots of interest in energy efficiency now, and especially now that some of the tariffs for renewables have been cut here, Italy, the UK, all those tariffs have been cut. And all those investors who were doing solar and wind are now saying, all this money is flowing in, where can we invest it? We'd quite like to invest it in energy efficiency. But they don't know very much about it. So we need standardization, which is the Investor Confidence Project, and we need training for financial institutions. And this is starting to happen. The European Investment Bank is doing some good work in this area. So that's my jigsaw. I'm sure there are other parts of the puzzle, but I think we can put that together. I think one of the problems in the past is people have just focused on one piece of that jigsaw. So they've taken a piece of the jigsaw and they've made a very precise jigsaw piece on its own. But if you have a very precise jigsaw piece and you don't have the other pieces, you cannot build the jigsaw. So let's build the whole jigsaw. Work on all the pieces. And just policy, just to sort of address policymakers, I think some important points. We need to reward all the benefits that come from energy efficiency, not just the energy saving. We need to design energy markets to reward those benefits. And also, this is very interdisciplinary because, for instance, if you save energy or you improve the efficiency of housing and you save on fuel poverty, you actually save money in the health budget, not the energy budget. And we need to make sure decisions are more driven by the demand side. In every country in the world, the energy department or ministry is dominated by energy supply people, not by energy demand people. And we need to move away from creating top-down programs and try and create a real market for energy efficiency. And of course, we also need stability of policy, something that we've not had on renewables. So just a brief word to finish on the future. This is a great 1920s cigarette card I found from Germany, looking at the future. And these two ladies are looking into what are quite obviously iPads. The fact that they have big earphones and a big kind of box on the belt is not so accurate. There's also a flying car in the background. We don't quite have flying cars yet. And they're also smoking, which is sort of probably going away. But anyway, it's an interesting thing about the future. You know, people kind of, even in the 20s, were foreseeing iPads. So I think we can put this jigsaw together, but we need to work on all the pieces. The first early slide was about what a healthy European energy efficiency market would have. I think if we put all those pieces together, we would have strong demand by owners and investors. We would have a highly skilled workforce, and we would have a mix of financing products and standardized tools. So I think we can get to that point, but we need to put all the jigsaw together. And again, just going back finally to this slide, you know, oil and gas, very mainstream. Wind farms, very mainstream. You could go into 10 or 20 banks and raise money for a wind farm. But energy efficiency isn't like that. It's very tiny, very specialized. But I think if we work on all the bits of the jigsaw, we can actually make that become standardized, mainstream, large volume. And that's a future that we're building, helping to build with the Investor Confidence Project. And I'm very keen to work with other people who are interested in building that future where energy efficiency becomes totally mainstream and just like any other energy resource. So with that, that's what I have to say. Be very happy to talk in the break, coffee break, answer questions, talk about the Investor Confidence Project or anything else. But thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Steve.